We are about to break down one of the most brutal punishments in history. This guy was dragged for miles, hanged until he was barely alive, and then disemboweled in front of a giant crowd. And no, this isn't a movie. This actually happened to William Wallace. Wallace wasn't even a king, but he was given an execution so insane, it was designed to terrify an entire country. But what if a punishment is so extreme, it actually does the opposite of what it's supposed to? What if trying to erase a man from history accidentally makes him a legend? Today, we're unpacking how the most savage execution imaginable kicked off a nation's fight for freedom. To get why this execution was so unbelievably cruel, you need to know the two people at the center of this story. First, you've got King Edward I of England, also known as the Hammer of the Scots. This guy was a total beast. He was ruthless and believed he had the right to rule everything, especially Scotland. He saw it as just some rebellious land he needed to crush. The whole thing started because Scotland's king died, and the country was a mess. Edward saw his chance, put a puppet king on the throne, and basically took over. When the Scots fought back, Edward went crazy. He invaded, sacked a whole town, and made all the Scottish nobles bend the knee. It looked like Scotland was completely finished. But out of nowhere, a new challenger appeared. Not some super-rich lord, but a knight named William Wallace. And Wallace was built different. While all the other Scottish nobles gave up and swore loyalty to Edward, Wallace said, nope. To him, Edward was an invader, not a king. This one move was the ultimate act of defiance. He wasn't just fighting a war. He was saying the entire English takeover was illegal. Wallace and his buddy Andrew de Moray started a rebellion, and at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, they pulled off a shocking win against a way bigger English army. Suddenly, Wallace was a national hero, basically running a free Scotland. But this also put a giant target on his back. Edward I hated this guy more than anyone. Other rebels could be forgiven, but Wallace was a symbol. And Edward knew, to kill a symbol, you can't just kill the man. You have to destroy him in a way nobody will ever forget. The punishment had to be a public spectacle of pure terror. For 7 years, William Wallace was the most wanted man in the country. After a big loss in battle, he basically went off the grid, maybe even going to Europe to ask for help. But Edward never stopped hunting him. He would forgive other rebels, but not Wallace. Never. The end didn't come in an epic battle. It came from betrayal. On August 5th, 1305, a Scottish knight who used to fight for freedom, Sir John de Menteith, turned him in. Capturing Wallace was like winning the Super Bowl for the English king. But they didn't just execute him on the spot. Oh no, Edward's plan was much bigger. They forced Wallace to walk 400 miles to London. This wasn't just a trip, it was a non-stop humiliation tour. They paraded him through towns like a zoo animal, all to break him mentally. On August 23rd, they put him on trial in Westminster Hall. And when I say trial, I mean it was a completely fake show. This was the heart of English power, and there was no jury, no defense. The verdict was already decided. They literally put a crown of leaves on his head to mock him, like he was trying to be king. The judge starts reading the charges: treason, murder, all this crazy stuff. Now, as an outlaw, Wallace wasn't even allowed to talk. But he did anyway. When they accused him of treason, he yelled one of the most legendary lines in history. I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject. Boom. He had never sworn loyalty, so in his mind, he was a prisoner of war, not a traitor. Of course, they completely ignored him. The trial was just a lame excuse for the insane punishment they had already planned. The sentence they gave him wasn't just death. It was a step-by-step guide to publicly destroy a person, and it started immediately. First step, being drawn. They ripped his clothes off, taking away any last bit of his knightly status. Then, they tied him to a wooden frame and attached it to a horse. This kicked off a miles-long horror show from the Tower of London to the execution spot at Smithfield. They went incredibly slow. The streets were basically rough cobblestone and garbage. Getting dragged over that would have been pure agony, ripping his skin to shreds. The government literally told the public to get involved. People lined the streets, screaming at him, throwing trash, rocks, and even poop at his body. He was being whipped by the crowd as they dragged him along. This was government-approved torture, all to make a hero look like a pathetic criminal. But here's the crazy part. Witnesses said Wallace was completely calm. He didn't scream or beg. We don't know if it was insane willpower or just shock, but it left an impression. Even though some people in the crowd loved the violence, others were just silently horrified by what they were seeing. This whole parade was a mind game, designed to show everyone that Wallace was broken before the real execution even began. Finally, they arrived at Smithfield, the go-to spot for public executions in London. A massive crowd was waiting. This is where the hanged, drawn, and quartered sentence gets real. Each step was designed to punish a specific crime, and it is absolutely brutal. Step 1. He was hanged. But they didn't let him die. They pulled him down while he was still alive, choking and totally conscious. The point wasn't death, it was maximum suffering. Step 2. While he was still breathing on the platform, they cut off his genitals. Then, they sliced his stomach open. The executioner literally reached inside, pulled out his intestines, and threw them on a fire right in front of him. He was forced to watch himself be disemboweled. It is one of the most horrific things I have ever heard of. Step 3. At this point, Wallace was finally dead. For the crime of treason, they chopped off his head. The executioner held it up for the cheering crowd. This was the big finale. But it's not over. Final step, quartering. They hacked his body into 4 giant chunks. This symbolized the complete and total destruction of the king's enemy. No body, no grave, no shrine. William Wallace, the man, was gone. Erased. The execution was over, but King Edward's ultimate power move was just getting started. He used Wallace's body parts to send a message across the entire kingdom. First, they took Wallace's head, dipped it in tar so it would last longer, and stuck it on a spike on London Bridge. It was a 24/7 billboard saying, "This is what happens when you mess with the king." Later, they even added the heads of other Scottish rebels next to his. Next, they mailed his 4 body parts to different cities as a warning. One piece went to Newcastle. Another went to Berwick, a town the English had already massacred. A third went to Perth. And the last piece went to Stirling, the site of Wallace's biggest victory. It was the ultimate flex, a way to poison the memory of Scottish victory. By scattering his body, Edward literally turned his enemy into a map of his own power. And at first, it looked like it worked. Scotland was terrified. People gave up, thinking no rebellion was worth an ending like that. But Edward made one massive miscalculation. He understood power, but he had no idea what he had just unleashed. Instead of scaring everyone into submission, the insane brutality of the execution made people furious. The story of his trial and his courage spread everywhere. The gruesome details didn't just create fear, they created rage. People didn't see it as justice, they saw it as the act of a monster. Wallace the man was dead, but Wallace the legend was born. His execution became the ultimate rallying cry. And here's the craziest part. It supposedly lit a fire under a young Scottish noble who could never decide which side to be on, Robert the Bruce. Just 7 months after Wallace was butchered, Robert the Bruce crowned himself King of Scots and relaunched the war for independence. The terror that was meant to end the rebellion accidentally started its final and most important chapter. So, the execution of William Wallace was one of the most extreme, calculated acts of terror in all of history. King Edward used every trick in the book, public shame, insane torture, symbolic dismemberment, to make an example out of this one guy. But it was a colossal failure. He destroyed Wallace's body, but he made his spirit immortal. The punishment was so savage it completely backfired. It didn't create fear, it created a martyr. It didn't destroy Scotland, it gave it a reason to fight harder than ever. William Wallace's insane death became the #1 story for Scottish independence. The man they chopped into 4 pieces became more whole and more powerful in death than any king could have ever predicted. If you can't believe how crazy this story was, smash that like button and subscribe for more insane history breakdowns. I want to know what you guys think. What other historical figure had an ending that literally changed everything? Let me know in the comments below. We'll see you in the next video.